Okay,
Okay, yeah, all you've got to do is just call the meeting to order and
Okay.
ask the clerk to call roll.
Let's call the meeting to order and let's call roll.
Chloe,
Here.
Cree,
What did you say?
Cree,
Cree, here.
and Mossovich.
Super. And then if you just introduce the agenda item, I can
Okay.
walk you through what we asked the committee to
Okay,
do.
the agenda item
It's the
is
first one.
approval. We need to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
So yeah, the packet included the draft minutes that staff prepared from your meeting on September 23rd.
Yep.
And if there are any comments from the committee members or suggested changes, now would be the time to request those. If there are none and everybody's good with the way the minutes reflect the discussion of the meeting, then we would recommend that it be approved by motion in a second and then a vote in favor.
I give a motion. Can I do it or
You-
no?
Yeah, you can make a motion, sure.
You can
Chair
make a
can make a
motion
motion,
that
you can
we
make,
approve the
you
minutes.
can move the minutes to be approved.
I second the motion.
Okay, and then this can be done just like all in favor.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Super.
Okay, and then,
The draft audit
oh,
report.
there we are, draft audit report.
Yeah, so this was really the item, the reason we had to schedule this meeting a little later and then asked you to postpone it again is, you might recall in September, we had told you that the audit work was underway and we had provided you draft, year-end financials, but they were not, in final form. Or they were not, had not yet been completely reviewed by the district's auditors. We put out with a packet, a couple of days ago, what is now the draft audit. And I say draft, this is not going to change anymore, but it hasn't yet been accepted by the board of directors of Templeton CSD. That is on the agenda for next Tuesday. So this actual document, the same one we sent you, is in the agenda packet for the board of directors meeting. And the auditors will be making a presentation at that meeting. And of course, if something were to have changed, and I don't expect that, but between now and Tuesday, or as a result of that presentation, it would inform the committee and whatnot, but we don't expect that. So the committee members now have a copy of the district's audited financials, not yet accepted or finalized, but audited financials as prepared by the district's auditors. You are free to read this forwards and backwards. What you'll find probably is a lot of information that either does not pertain directly to the task at hand, or that you may not be particularly interested in. There's a lot of notes and things that are designed to satisfy reporting requirements, but that are not particularly applicable to Measure A. I would suggest that if you went to page 16, and we can bring this up if you'd like, if you don't have it, actually, yeah, bring this packet up and scroll to page 16 with the report, and let's zoom in. See it a little bigger. This is the statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balances for the governmental funds. So the district has two types of funds: governmental funds, or I'll use tax dependent services, and business-like services or enterprise funds. So they're separate because they use different bases of accounting. It's not important, but that's just why they don't show up on the same page. So the fire protection, or the fire fund, is totally separately broken out on this page. And in it, this is the year under audit. So last fiscal year 23-24, July 1st, 2023 through June 30th, 2024. You can see all the major activity in all the funds, but the fire fund is the one that you're interested in. This is a summary of the revenues, and in it now we have an audited figure that the Measure A parcel tax received $518,486, and you can see that all of those parcel tax funds went to the fire fund. They're not applied to any other fund of the district. And then you can see the expenditures in the fire fund for the same year. $1.3 million was spent on salaries and benefits, 300 and some $1,000 on materials and services, $273,000 on administrative and cost allocation, about $40,000 in capital outlay, for a total of just a little over $1.9 million in expenses. And so that has been the figure that this group has relied on in the past in terms of demonstrating that all of the Measure A funds received by the district were in fact utilized to provide fire services. The ordinance that was passed by the voters in 2019 that, Measure A, states that the district cannot use these funds outside of fire services, and then provides a broad range of uses of Measure A funds within the fire services program, including salaries and benefits and equipment and apparatus, et cetera. But you can kind of clearly see we spent nearly $2 million and we brought in $518,000, and those funds were not applied to any other district service. So they didn't land in for example, they didn't go to the streetlight fund or Parks and Recreation or somewhere else. So this is the information that the prior committees have kind of relied on to ensure that that was the case. And that's fundamentally the role of the Oversight Committee, is to report out to the Board of Directors and then really to the public that the Measure A funds are in fact going to the fire services and nowhere else, and they're being spent on activities that are appropriate.
It's maybe a dumb question, but you said we have a surplus? Is that, or we used it all?
Oh, so, I mean, every year the fund may accrue some additional revenue, the revenue beyond what's expended, but it remains with the fund.
Right,
So,
oh, okay.
so again, this fund balance, whatever is available at the end of the year becomes the beginning balance for the next year. It doesn't kind of start over. It's not part of a general fund. This is a fire fund, and so if there's excess, if there's revenues over expenses in a given year, that improves the balance for the next
Well, am I
year.
reading it wrong? It says other financing sources. Is that a plus? I mean, change in fund balance,
Other income or
under other financing sources?
That's operating transfers in and out where it's
Uh-huh.
blank.
oh, yeah.
It's blank.
No, not where it's blank, where it says 1,000,006, whatever, wherever it is. It's the 1, 2, 3, third total down. It says.
Oh, okay, that's total governmental fund. So that's combining the general fund, the fire protection fund, the Parks and Recreation fund, the streetlights fund, and the
Okay.
community facilities. Only the second column, the fire protection column, is the one that I was referring to.
Okay.
So these total, this is if all these funds were merged, all the governmental funds were merged together.
So then
That total column would.
at the beginning year, we had 3 million. At the end of the year, we have 4 million. So where did we get the extra money is where I'm kinda, see where it says beginning of the year, we had under
So
fire
it can be
protection.
capital
Yeah.
fees, it can be, so
But I
we're
mean, where do
strictly,
you, how,
So,
if you're in the hole, how are you paying for these things? Is-
well, we're not in the hole, right? So this is showing that the combined fund balance improved by roughly $600,000. But that combined balance includes more than just the fire operation fund. Fire capital, we have a future fire set aside, we have a asset replacement fund.
Okay.
So they're all part of the fire fund. The growth of the fire fund last year would have been largely, in terms of fund balance, largely attributable to capital. We received interest on we had about, during that fiscal year, about $3 million in
So we're
capital
never
cash,
in the
and so we
hole,
are,
like this can't go in the hole then,
well,
pretty much.
I wouldn't say it can't, but if it does, we're in a little more trouble.
Okay, and the surplus just stays in there until the fall. See, I worked for the county. And a lot of times when they get a budget, that close to the end of the year, they'd come to us and they'd say, we want this because we got this surplus. So they would buy something not necessarily needed, just to use the money so they could get more. That's what I'm trying to figure out here. Maybe I'm,
Yeah.
yeah, we
Doesn't
don't do
happen.
that.
that doesn't happen here?
So the fund stays with so what you're describing is, unfortunately, again, as a former city manager, so very biased view of if you operated it under a sort of a general fund concept, like in a city, the fire department would be part of the general fund typically. If there were funds that were unspent, essentially it would flush back to the general fund to be reallocated in the following year. And so what you see in some of these agencies is there's an effort to not, in order to prevent giving up those funds and maybe not getting it back, is to
Spend it.
is to make it.
Yeah, but this, we don't
These
do
funds,
that.
any funds that remain with the fire fund, just stay with the fire fund. This is just a
Okay.
report of a certain date. It doesn't ever fly, it doesn't ever go back to zero and start over
Okay.
again. If the fund balance is growing, and again, this is a merged balance, not just the operations.
Mhm.
If the fund balance is growing, it stays with the fire fund. But in this case, most of that growth would have been in the capital.
Okay.
Now, because again, we would have earned about, we would have had about $3 million in investments in the capital fund that would have earned.
Yeah, so it says here investment earnings were 200 and almost,
Yeah.
were 209,000.
Most all of that would have been in the capital fund. And then we've had capital facility fees paid, and we would have spent very little last year. Now, this year, we've already spent $1 million of it. So like, a year from now, when you're gonna go look at this,
Mhm.
the inverse will happen. The
Okay,
balances will be lower, almost certainly, at the end of the year than they were at the beginning.
okay.
So the question I have, is of that balance that remains, 613,000, that goes into the 3.6 to create the 4.28, right, number? I'm tied to making sure that that money is fitting within the scope of the Measure A, what's called, plan that we have that was adopted by the community. So when we have a balance of 613, I need to make sure, we need to, the committee need to verify that that money won't be pulled and put somewhere else to balance the budget in another department, so to speak.
So the only comment that I will make is the new auditors do something a little different than the previous auditors, where the capital fees for the fire department are put what they call grant revenue.
They're called what?
They call it grant revenue
Oh,
for
yeah.
whatever reason.
Okay.
And so the capital fees you'll find in that amount, the 428 amount.
And that's good. I just need to be able to say that the funds that we have in our, so I'm fighting for this account here, that it doesn't get.
So here's where you'd be able to see it. If there was money going from the fire fund to another fund, it would show up under this operating transfers in and out. So for example, you can see under Parks and Recreation, this 229, you see how there's a $229,000?
Yeah.
That's money coming in to Parks and Recreation. And if we go to the governmental funds, we should be able to see that money coming out. If we go to page 19. And we
Yep, you'll see it coming
zoom
up there.
zoom in, see that same figure, 229, 441?
Yeah.
That is coming out of the solid waste enterprise fund.
Transfer of funds.
Yes, I'm using that as an example because there wasn't any money coming out of the fire fund to another fund outside of, at the administrative allocation. There's no money going to Parks and Recreation or the water fund. It would show up under that transfers in or out. Or if there were dollars leaving or coming.
Thank you. That's exactly what it is.
The balance there, it gets kicked back into the general fund,
No,
right?
it stays with the fire fund.
It stays with the
Yeah.
fire fund?
That, okay, that's.
Yeah, it does. There is no
Can change.
general fund like you would have in the city of Paso Robles, for example.
Okay.
Where if there was revenues over expenses, or there was let's say there was a savings in the budget for the fire department at the end of the year, not less money was spent than was allocated, it would go back to that would sort of reset. This doesn't happen in this fund, all the fire operations remain year after year after year
In the fire.
in the fire fund. Now, this fund, it's more than just, it's labeled fire protection, but again, on our budget, it'll be multiple funds. It'll be the fire operating fund, fire capital fund, fire asset replacement fund, and the future fire operations, all merged, but they're all part of the fire fund.
All under the scope of the Measure A
Yes.
funds. That's the key piece. Yeah, thank you.
And so Jeff, if you have a surplus and you need that money for some reason, it'll be documented, meaning it'll transfer it from the fire protection fund into, say, parks or whoever.
It would have shown up here if that had occurred.
So you're saying it could happen?
It could happen,
You could take money from the.
not from Measure A, but from.
Not, oh,
Yeah.
The fire protection.
oh.
So for
okay.
example, let me give an example. See this top line item says property taxes and assessments. the top line on page 16, go back, sorry, page 16. Those are general property taxes, property tax revenue, with the exception of the CFD funds. And the district board has, it's essentially its policy to allocate those. That hasn't differed really at all in many years. But theoretically or technically, the board could allocate those property taxes differently from what you do. And so there probably wouldn't be a need to actually transfer money from one fund to another, but you can allocate those funds differently and have the same result. But those come into the district as one payment, and it's the district's priority that allocates how much property taxes go to fire protection, parks and recreation, streetlights, etc.
So and we're not facing that situation this year, but we may next year if we, with some of the capital you're talking about. I just think it would be clear if we need to see that 518 or whatever figure it ends up being next year.
Yeah, it should be a little bit higher.
Yeah, a little bit higher. But at least you have a pathway to say, yeah, this is where the funds are right now. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would not want you to report that Measure A funds were collected and appropriately spent unless you understood how this sheet or how the district's operation works. But that money only goes to the fire fund, and it does not.
Thank you. Yeah.
So,
So, yeah, this is the information. I guess what I would suggest is the auditors will be participating in next Tuesday's Board of Directors meeting. Couple of options to follow this for the committee members. One, I will commit to you that if there are any changes as a result of their presentation or any changes between now and then, you will know about it immediately. Two, I will confirm with you that the board adopted or accepted the audited financials as they were presented to you, if there weren't any changes. And if you wish to either watch that meeting, it'll be posted online within a day or so, by Wednesday, or you can attend that meeting either in person or via Zoom and ask questions of either the board or through the board to the auditors if you want additional clarity, or if there's any reason you think it would be important to you. Any of you could do that, or any citizen, of course, could do that. But it's our expectation that these financial statements will be accepted by the board and as they're presented. There were just a few really minor kind of issues that we were sorting out over the last week or so, and now they're ready to go. None of which affected this. So this is really the last piece of information that I think you need in order to prepare your report to the board. And so, assuming this all happens as you would expect, this committee could, I guess it's really the next agenda item, so I don't want to get ahead of myself. But yeah, this is the last information that I think you need to finalize that report. So if you're happy with this, I'll commit to, again, any of you may attend in person, attend via Zoom, ask questions of the board during the audit presentation, which would be, of course, relayed to the auditors for clarity, because we want to make absolutely clear, the goal of these reports is to be as transparent as possible. However, they're laid out in a manner that's intended to be read by like investors, people who might hold bonds or something like that. We don't have a lot of debt, but so they're very standardized. So that way, if you looked at a report from another agency, it would be laid out in the same way. They're not necessarily very intuitive for the layperson, but they're prepared in a way that meets the GASB standard.
Great. Gatsby saying, no, just kidding.
Yeah, not
Not that, right. Great. I would like to make a motion
okay,
to accept this report as evidence that the funds have been according to the Measure A bylaws. That was the word I'm looking for. And accept them with appreciation.
Second that.
Okay, we have, motion is approved. Go
Well,
ahead.
yeah, actually, we need a vote too. We have a
Oh,
second, a
that
first and a
vote.
second,
A vote.
yeah, just all in favor would be fine.
Aye.
All in, yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
all of it's.
Yeah, all of you are in favor, sir? Yes.
Yes, I agree.
Super. And again, if there's any information, anything that changes over the next week, you will know about it. Cause I will know about it.
Oh, okay. So the next item is the preparation of report to the board.
So we provided the committee a copy of last year's report to the board, which was prepared primarily by the former chair, Dan Mosinich, who actually gave this, who's attended, and maybe you've given 3 of these by now, annual reports, to the board of directors. And so this is what was given to the board. If you, all of you were actually here serving on the committee last year at the same time, and the committee authorized Dan Mosinich on behalf of the committee to prepare and issue the report. So I think you have a number of options. The committee could follow suit, follow what it has done in the past and authorize the chairperson to prepare and issue the report to the board of directors. Of course, our office would make sure that all the committee members got a copy of that report before it was issued to the board, so you knew exactly what it contained. And if that's the case, staff would work with the chair to help finalize that. The committee could also choose to prepare that report conjunctive, with participation from all of you. That would require noticed committee meetings. Unfortunately, and I know there was some question just at your last meeting about could like the former chair work with the current chair to prepare the report? Because this is a committee of 3, even 2 of you talking about committee business constitutes a meeting, and so it would have to be a noticed meeting. And I apologize for that hiccup, but this committee is subject to the Brown Act, and so it's just, it doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means we would need to know when you wanted to do that. We would notice the meeting and assist you in that effort. But so you really can't do so kind of casually or kind of,
How did you
behind
do
the
this?
scenes.
Well, I worked with Jeff and with Chief to pieces together. I have a bias, which you may already know, but I'm gonna share it. And that is that we do more than just show that we're using the money correctly. Using the money correctly is intended to have some kind of an outcome or an effect. That effect is listed as, and you'll see this under the second set of 3 bullets in this report I wrote last year. What I would do is I would talk with Chief and say, how are we doing? Response times. I know you have a report that comes out springish, if I'm not mistaken, use that as a guide to say. So when the community member comes and says, well, I'm glad you're using it, but is it making a difference? We want to be able to say yes, or we're working on it. So and that's me. I'll just be honest with you. That's the reason we're doing this. It's not just to say the money's being correct, but are the desired outcomes.
Yeah.
And they have been consistent throughout the times that I've been doing it. And that would be my suggestion, if you chose to just to kind of see.
And does that require a quorum if I just?
No, it does not. You can work with staff to your heart's content.
Okay.
And so
Because I know
if
you
you're
guys
willing
are
to give
busy,
that
right?
if you're willing to give that a try, so here's I guess one method. I just want to just brainstorm a couple options here. If the committee were to authorize or delegate the preparation report to the chairperson, and the chairperson works with staff to kind of finalize it, you always have the option of calling another committee meeting if something comes up. I'm not sure this is representing the committee. I want to meet with the committee members one more time. We could call another meeting and it could do that. But if you felt comfortable with the information you were reviewing and working with, then we would get this report in nearly final format. We could send it out to the committee members. Now, they cannot communicate with one another about changes to it, but if any committee member then says, look, I've got an issue, then I can say, well, then I'm gonna recommend to the chair that we call another meeting and resolve that issue before it goes forward. So I think that's kind of what we've done in the years past, is just sent the report out to the committee members. There hasn't been any issues, and the chairpersons attended the board meeting.
Previously, we haven't needed to.
Yeah.
So
I
we
would
send
use
this,
it, I would,
yeah.
I would spend some time with Chief Peterson, making sure to, just that piece that I'm talking about, the impact of these, the correct use of funds. And collect information that I could support that summary saying, yes, it has made an impact. It's usually seen in the associated findings. For the direct finding, the key finding is, are we using the money right? But the associated funding is, and it's making a difference. That's the key piece. So that's what I look for myself. And that comes from my own professional experiences. We might use the funds well, properly, but is it getting the desired result? That can sometimes be yes or no. It has been consistently though.
Okay.
So I think if you're willing to give that a go, then I think the committee could direct the chair to prepare the report, and always know that if there's a hiccup in this process, it's not a very long report, it doesn't require a lot of considerable time or effort, but if there's a hiccup or you run into something that you want the committees to discuss further, we just simply call another committee meeting before the report's finalized. There is no deadline to finishing it. But the board, if too much time passes, so is there an issue or something like that? So I would encourage us to, over the next, I know it's the holidays coming up, and so, probably not gonna do something then, but maybe by the end of January or something, we have this report done. And then as soon as it's prepared, we'll put it on the next board agenda, or one that you're able to attend or participate in. You could participate in that meeting, you could participate via Zoom without any hiccup. And if you preferred, and then issue the report. And the reports have been accepted in the past by there might be a question or two from the board of directors, but they'll probably just show their appreciation for your efforts and thank you in the committee, and accept the report.
Well, if you just went with the chief and Jeff and then sent the committee members
Right, so I drafted this.
then there's no, you
There
don't have
wasn't
to,
any-
unless you saw something that you said, well, I want.
Or vice versa, the committee member may have said
Right.
it.
Okay,
So what I would offer you, you're welcome to use this document and change it, create your own. But if you pick and, cut and paste from here, that works. It's up to you.
I don't have to pay any finder's fee.
You have to use Chat GPT.
Are you comfortable doing it?
I think so, if you would.
We'll be happy to support
Happy
you.
to help, and I would probably follow your format, of course, changing it with the findings, making sure that, maybe it's improved, so that would be good to put in there.
Continued positive impact,
Okay.
Yeah, just some of the dates of like our reporting don't necessarily align, so, just to clarify in advance. So the fire chief does prepare an annual report. The most recent one was for calendar year 2023. And it went to the board, I think, probably last March. That data is published and is available. This information, the Measure A Oversight Committee and the this financial documents fall as the fiscal year, July 1 through June 30th, but we don't we report data on like fire operations on a calendar year basis. So it's just,
Yeah.
there's a little, they don't always align, but if you were to look at the last available fire annual report, which of course we can email, it's on our website, and we can email you a link to that. It would be it would include the second half, or the first half, sorry. It would have included the first half of the fiscal year that you're looking at now with these audits, and the second, which is the second half of the last calendar year.
With having done this 4 or 5 times now, even though there's a 6-month lag between the two, cumulatively, you can see the pattern. So even though they're on different 6-month calendars, when I'm looking at 23 calendar year for this thing, let's say, I'm also knowing that the previous one used the first half, was already used part of it for the previous reports meetings, previous reports data as well. So over time, it all kind of blends blends in because it's been consistently used. It is different, but it's not finished like that.
And I think what Dan's talking about is some of the data that we capture through our reporting system. Gives us response times, gives us how many calls we're doing throughout the year. This year, we've seen a significant increase, and for the first time in history, we've exceeded 1,000 calls for the department. We're actually gonna exceed 1,100 calls for the department. So that just kind of lends back to what Dan was saying about, is it providing a better service to the community? Cause 1,100 calls, the old volunteer department ways, a volunteer department couldn't handle that call volume load. Now, is it only 3.8 calls per day? Yeah, but it's more than a volunteer department is accustomed to. And typically the breakover, if you look at NFPA statistics, is 1,000 calls. That's kind of the cutoff. And even departments that exceed 700 to 750 start going towards the full-time, model. And then they transition into more full-time, and as they get more and more calls and busier, then you see the reserve ranks start to diminish. That's just the natural
So
trend.
what, I mean, under the associated findings, then it would just be adding that,
Mhm.
integrating it, that, yeah, your funds are being used good, and this is how many calls, and maybe something like that in there. Okay,
And I think at some point in time, we may have to come back to the community and say, we need to float another bond.
fill another one.
Float another bond, try and get them to pass another bond,
Oh,
like the school district tried. In the end, was successful in doing. And we just want to have a cumulative record of results over time, so that when that time comes, we've done our homework and we're ready to move forward as a district. That's really what this is mostly focused on.
okay. Well, then I'll start working with you then, and maybe after the holidays.
Absolutely, yeah,
And
whatever
then-
committee, whenever you're ready,
Okay.
yeah, just let us know and we'll be happy to kind of walk you through this. Like, I think I actually have a Word version of your report from last year, so we can provide that to you. I just want to make sure we have to limit the communication that you have with other committee members.
Right.
It's particularly important, because again, we're a small committee anytime two of you talk, it's a quorum. So you should be having a meeting. So I can provide that to you. I would ask there be some concurrence from the committee members that the chairperson will prepare the report prepare initiative report as in years past. And there'll be communication between staff and the committee members prior to that occurring, and an opportunity for committee members to either request another meeting or at least review the materials. Again, you couldn't communicate about them, but you can review them and communicate back with staff to see if in the meeting.
Well, we can make that in the motion that,
Yeah, if you want to do that by motion, that's fine too. You can,
yeah, or, I mean,
I was just trying to note, just for the record of this meeting, that in fact, the committee members are delegating this to the chairperson.
okay, is that what you guys wanna do?
Absolutely.
Okay,
If you're good with it.
yeah,
And we're here to support.
and then
you,
you
Jeff.
will, so my understanding is after we put it together and we talk to the chief, you guys get a draft of whatever we did, and then if there's a problem, you let us, okay.
And it'll just go through.
Yeah, just have to
And-
go through
and
staff.
go through
You can
your-
have as much communication with staff and the individual as without a Brown Act violation.
Okay,
And but I cannot be in like an intermediary. I can't say, well, Dan really has a great idea about
Right,
talking about this. I'd say, no, a committee member wants to talk about this. We need to hold a
we
committee
have a
meeting.
meeting at this
Then you can
point.
discuss the
Okay.
content of the concern.
Okay.
Obviously, if we see a typo, we just fix it.
Yeah,
But,
okay. All right,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah, sounds like we had concurrence, and if you're good, then it's at your schedule.
okay,
So we're available here. You just, I know you're dealing with some stuff back at the ranch, so to speak, a couple of you. So, when that's quieted down, and if it takes until after the holidays, no problem.
No problem,
This
'cause it
will
has
not be, this will not be, I mean, I don't want you to feel rushed in any way,
Well,
but this will not need to be a huge endeavor.
it's not is there a deadline?
There's not a deadline.
No deadline, okay,
But
Alright.
but the committee's bylaws will do say you shall prepare an annual report.
okay,
You don't even, I mean, this, you cannot technically do the report until after the finance, the audits can, accepted, you know, so, you know,
And
this
that's-
is not, that's
yeah.
Tuesday at the earliest, so, but, yeah, I would think within a meeting or maybe two with the chief, you'll have enough information to be comfortable.
Okay,
So this will not need to be a big, long, drawn out.
Okay.
Process.
well, should we make a motion to,
Yeah, I mean, I think there was concurrence and we have that, that's part, you know, record the
Okay.
meeting minutes and,
Okay.
there's really nothing for the committee to approve.
Approve,
because
okay.
You don't have a copy of the report or something here, but, so I think that works just fine. And if that is the case, then my recommendation for this future meeting would be, a meeting early next year would only be called if it's necessary in preparing the report. Otherwise, the committee, I mean, you could meet more often, but there really isn't, anything likely necessary to meet on until after the close of the next fiscal year, so like early next fall. I guess I wanna look back, the committee, the appointments.
Yeah, it'll be up in, I'm not sure what month we did it in, but.
We're gonna go back and look and see, look at your appointments. We're actually accepting, applications right now for all of the committees, including Measure A Oversight, so it's possible that somebody new could be joining the committee, next year.
is there a number that it has to be, or?
It's got a flexible,
Oh,
size,
okay.
so,
Sure.
yeah, minimum of 3, I believe, but, we can have additional persons.
Okay,
I think actually a year ago you had 4, because Rod Hewitt was still part of the committee, so for a little while we had 4 people.
yeah, we did, huh? Okay. Okay, so the next meeting is, you'll let us know.
Well, yeah, I would say the next meeting will either be as a result of either your meeting some committee
Right.
assistants and preparing the report, or
So-
a committee member wanting to comment on that, or probably not until, next September-ish.
So that ends our, agenda.
Yeah, and we'll double check the appointment dates for all the committee members and, let you know if it's time to either reapply or say goodbye. That's, yeah, no, I, it's
That sounds kind of
a
fun.
little too cold, right? It's already a goodbye.
Thank you for your help. See ya.
Reading some Dr. Seuss.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, so the meeting is
You get to adjourn it.
adjourned.
Thank you.